Welcome back to another episode of the Dadhood podcast. On this episode, we talked about the father wound, talked about healing from the effects of having an absent father. And did this with Ehsun Anwar. And because of the nature of the topic, it being about trauma and healing from that, I wanted to start off with a few disclaimers. So, number one, neither myself or my guest Ehsan are professionals in terms of psychotherapy or anything like that. We are both just very interested in the topic of healing from our traumas, and we wanted to discuss it with each other. And Ehsan has some experience in terms of coaching some of his clients when it comes to suffering from these types of traumas. So that's one thing. The other is that SN doesn't have, although it seems like he has a Muslim name, he is not a Muslim himself. He doesn't ascribe to any particular faith. So he has certain ways in which he looks at healing and the way that one can deal with traumas, which is outside of a faith perspective. And me, I come from an Islamic faith perspective. So we were able to share a platform where he was able to express the way he understood it, and I was able to express the way I understood it. So neither this doesn't mean that the way that he understands it is correct. Neither does it say that the way I understand it is the way that he should or people from a non-faith background should understand it like that either. It just means that he has a perspective and I have a perspective, and we were coming on the same platform to share our perspectives. And also, for those of you to know who are listening back to it now, is that it was done over an Instagram live where his audience were watching and my audience were watching. And with my audience being predominantly Muslim, I was coming from a Muslim angle. And with his audience, it seems like it's not predominantly from a faith background, or at least he isn't. He was coming from that angle. Um, and there may be some things that uh, I disagree with in terms of his outlook, but that doesn't mean that disagreement or him being on the platform means that that I promote any views that I disagree with. It just means that we're having a healthy conversation about healing from trauma. So I think that's a few disclaimers for you to take into mind when it comes to hearing some of our points of view, and just knowing that any advice that we give should also be taken by a pinch of salt, whether from me or whether from Esan. So anyway, I hope this is a topic which everybody who's listening can really enjoy and can really take some benefit from, because I definitely took benefit from the conversation when it comes to healing from the father wound, as we call it, and that's exactly what we're going to get into right now. Are we ready to
Yeah,
roll?
so definitely, I'm excited. I'm really excited.
All right, good stuff. All right, so guys, let's start this off a bit formally from my side. So, this is actually the Dadhood podcast, essentially. So the Dadhood podcast is a podcast which I run. So my name is Shwaib. For those of you who don't know, many of you are joining over from Ihsan's channel and his Instagram page. My name is Shoaib, and I reached out to Ihsan just to see if we could put this together. So I run something called the Dadhood podcast, where I interview loads of different fathers, mainly Muslim fathers, but I have interviewed a few that are not Muslim or not from the faith. And what we do is just talk about all things to do with being a dad, and reach out to Ahsan saying that, okay, do you know what, we should probably do something, because you've gone around, done these reels and done these posts about the father wound and healing from the father wound. And that's something that I personally have had my own experiences with. I didn't grow up with my father, and it's something that we talk about a lot on my podcast. So I wanted to bring him on and have this discussion, co-host a discussion that hopefully you guys who are listening can benefit from this. And this is going to be kind of put together as like a proper podcast in terms of video and audio a little bit later. So after the live is done, if maybe you missed a little bit out, then we'll put it out so you guys can listen to it in full with maybe a bit extra quality as well. You might see the quality dropping here and there because of internet connections, but hopefully the actual recording is going to be really spick and span. So that's my introduction to myself and in terms of why we put this all together. And where do you want to take this? Do you have any? Should I shoot a question to you? Do you want to shoot a question back at me? Where do you want to take it, bro?
Well, thanks for the intro and thanks for for reaching out to me and having me on your podcast. And also, it's a pleasure to do this Instagram live with you and have you on my Instagram. So it's pretty cool that there's two channels going here. And yeah, it's just exciting. So as a life coach for myself, my work around the father wound is very, very specific. So I just want to start by letting everyone know who's listening to this from my end. What does that mean? What is a father wound?
Okay.
It's quite a broad term, but I recently did a video saying the more tense you felt around your father as a child, the more likely you are to go into survival mode as an adult. So you'll experience more overthinking, you'll experience more career stress, you'll experience more general anxiety, and you'll also experience relationship issues because you haven't had a healthy model of a relationship. So it branches out into so many different directions. Now, as a coach, I specialize in helping people to reduce that anxiety, to reduce that stress, to lower their guard, to feel safe, to understand that, hey, it's safe for you to relax. You don't need to prove yourself, and yeah, just to feel safe within their body. So that is what the father wound is for me. And there are other manifestations of it as well. Like if your father just wasn't even around, that's a different story, but I'm not going to go into that. So that is my input of what this is. But what about for yourself? Do you want to talk about those areas that I've said, or do you have your own unique input as to what that is?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of what the father wound really means to me, it's very much exactly what you said. But in my case, it was that my father wasn't around, so it being kind of like the wound is basically for me a part of me that has been left open. There's a part of me that's missing, and that part is basically when my father wasn't around and didn't give me what I needed from my father growing up. And so over time, in order to actually heal that wound and to close it, it's about me addressing that and knowing that, okay, that was an issue that happened in my life, and instead of running away from that experience, which I could easily so bat away and say that wasn't traumatic for me. Why? Because growing up, I didn't really miss out on much in terms of provisions. My mom was there; she did everything for us. I had an elder brother, an elder sister, I had uncles, I had aunties, I had cousins, I had a huge family support network. So what did I really miss out on? So I could easily bat that away and say, do you know what? There was no wound there. There wasn't anything. There wasn't nothing missing. But that's just running away from the problem. If you don't have a mother or a father in your life, there is going to be some level of trauma that you're feeling, whether you recognize it or not. And you need to then be mature enough to actually address that and know that there's something missing there. There's a wound there, is what I would say. And something needs to be done to actually start stitching that up. And that's a journey that I've recently started to take.
Yeah, well said. And it takes a lot of bravery and courage to look back. And like I said this when we were speaking off camera before, especially for Asian people, but for all people worldwide, it's considered like bad to even question your parents at all and say, hey, they're not perfect, they're human. Maybe they did make mistakes. Maybe some things are actually really bad for me. If you even speak about any of these things, you're considered like ungrateful, or it's blasphemy to do this. And that in itself is a cause of trauma. To not be honest about the depth of how you're feeling is a cause of trauma. So I'm quite intrigued about the degree of absence with your father. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and how you feel it translated?
Yeah, definitely happy to share that. So to start from the very top, I connected with my father when I was 23 years old. And I'm 27 now. So it's been about 4 years, maybe just under 4 years, when I've actually connected with him. I had a relationship with him. So to go back from there and to realize how I got to that point, my mother and my father divorced when I was maybe about 1 year old. So I have no memories of my father. I wasn't in his presence at all. Whereas I have an older brother and older sister who were in his presence and they have memories with him. And that divorce happened because of a breakdown in relationship between my mother and father, which was it was quite a difficult breakdown in the sense that they needed to be a huge court case involved. So this court case took about 15 years because
Mm.
there were a lot of difficulties in that relationship. And I'm not going to go into the details of it. People can, I'm sure people know what that means, what the difficulties are, and why there would be
Yeah.
court cases, right? And so that took about 15 years or so. And in that time of me sort of growing up, the earliest memory I have of maybe trying to question this situation was at a very young age, maybe 6 years old or something like this, where I'd actually ask my mum what a dad even is, because I didn't have this concept. And sometimes I'd even see like my uncles who had obviously had children of their own, had my cousins, and I was sometimes wonder, what is his role in the family, because I didn't recognize there being a role for a man in my family. So that's one of the earliest questions that I had. And then getting older and older into sort of the teenage years, I obviously had an understanding that, okay, my father's not around. I didn't grow up with my father. And some of those conversations started to become normalized. Why? Because I had friends that also didn't have their fathers around. So it was like it was kind of easy to discuss it. Like we didn't go into any detail. I think we understood that to be like a bit of a taboo subject. So we didn't kind of go into like, oh, so how do you feel? It's more like, oh, you don't have a dad. I don't have a dad too. Let's make it like a non-dad club, you know? And I think maybe that was our way of like trying to deal with the potential trauma that was
Mm.
going on in our
Mm.
minds.
Mm. Mm.
Um, and but then also I kind of recognized that this was more of a universal phenomenon, because when you start listening to music and you listen to especially hip hop and rap, a lot of the
Yeah.
themes in there are about not having your dad around and things like this.
Mhm.
And so I began to recognize that, okay, this is something that's it's a bigger phenomenon than myself. And in most cases, it's having a negative effect on people. So even though I didn't recognize it having a negative effect on me growing up, why? Like, because I mentioned earlier, I had a huge family support network, right? I had, my mom was providing for us, even though I knew it was difficult for her, even though I knew we didn't have much money growing up. I knew that she was single. She still did everything that, a normal parent would. We were able to buy things, go to theme parks, have days out. And I had, my uncles and my aunties taking me and getting things for me. So, um, although I didn't recognize it being difficult, when I started to listen to these rappers and I started to see these videos and just understand the phenomenon of not having your dad around and why it's such a negative thing, I began to also question whether it is negative for myself as well. And so I started to imagine, while I'm 16, I'm 17 now, I haven't had my dad around. Maybe we could have had more money in the household. Maybe my mom could have been happier having a good husband in her life. Maybe I would have been exposed to better opportunities. And I started, maybe my dad would be around to explain to me how to do my A levels, how to do my GCSEs, how to get into university, how to do relationships with girls. And so I started to question all of these things. So, am I really missing out? And that did begin to sort of plant a seed of resentment towards my father and a bit of hatred towards my father. And you have to remember, like, the court case was going on and didn't it stopped when I was about 15, 16. And that whole court case, because of the difficulties that are involved, I'm obviously hearing a lot about how my father was to my mother and how he was as a
Mm.
person. So whilst I'm
Mm.
also feeling like, yeah, I didn't have my dad around, I'm also saying to myself, well, I probably wouldn't want him around because he was this type of man and that type of man,
Mm.
you know?
Mm.
And it kind of eventually got to a stage where I felt like I didn't really want to um, have any connection with him or have
Yeah.
him in my life.
Mm.
And the moment that feeling really, really changed, was, to be honest, was when my son was about to be born. So by this time, I had gotten married at about 22 years old, probably quite young for
Mm.
many of the viewers here. But I think in Asian culture and stuff, getting married a bit younger is a bit more normalized. So I got married around that age, and it was pretty much immediately after being married, my wife got pregnant, and just before my son was being born, something came over me. Well, I said to myself, I'm about to become a dad, and I don't have a connection with my dad, you know, and I thought there's something wrong here. It just doesn't sound right. Even though I convinced myself I don't want a connection with him, that he's probably a poor person to be around, I just,
Mm.
and all those kind of things. There's something that just didn't feel right. That I was going to become a dad, and I didn't have a connection with him.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I found his number from some relatives, and I dropped him a call, And in my mind, I was thinking, this is either gonna go like this is actually, to me, I didn't say have it either. It was, this is gonna go terrible. Like he's gonna say, who the hell are you? Just put the phone down. And when he picked up the phone, he was actually really happy to hear that this was his son that he hasn't seen
Yeah,
for like
yeah,
more than 20 years.
yeah.
And I just, because of the image that I had of him and what I'd known about him, I just thought it was gonna go bad, but it didn't. And from that point onwards, we kind of just stayed in contact, stayed in touch. I let him know that he's gonna be a granddad, because my elder brother and elder sister hadn't had children at this point. So it was the first, his first grandchild. Um, and I mean, by then I had already known that he got married again and he had kids again as well. So I've got half siblings too. So in this kind of 3 to 4 year period, it's been about me getting to know who he is and getting to know like my half brothers, half siblings, my stepmother and the whole dad side of my family as well that I haven't met for all this time. So that's kind of how I got to that point. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That a lot of things that I've just learned just listening to that, because that's completely different to my upbringing. That's the absent father wound, as I've said.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of things I can feel intuitively how you would feel if your father isn't around. Rage and resentment are obviously going to be, and the feeling that something is missing. And funny enough, those are still almost identical to the feelings of having a father who is there, but you feel just didn't treat you right, or was explosively angry or whatever. The human emotions of discontentment tend to be the same, regardless of what method they were created by.
Yeah.
But a commonality between us both here is that we didn't let that darken our hearts, you see. And that's the thing for everyone who's listening to this. It's like, the intention of talking about your difficult past and everything you went through is to feel love again. That's the end product.
Yeah.
To feel free, to feel light, to heal your heart, to feel whole. And you did a great job there. And I think a really interesting part about that story was that your father was like, hey, I'm glad you called me, son. Like, maybe not those words, but that's how he felt. And what people need to realize is that our fathers, even if they are absent or disappeared, they didn't do it consciously. They were not abusive consciously. They were not absent consciously. And this is perhaps the most difficult part for anyone to understand.
Yeah.
You see? Because when your father or my father or anyone's dad was born, they weren't 5 years old thinking, you know what my life ambition is? To like have a divorce, to mistreat my child, to cheat, to abuse, to do all these things. No sane human thought that. But from their childhood, when they had to receive the trauma from their fathers and things like that, their heart got so contracted, their guard came so high, their emotions got so scrambled that they lost connection with their intuition. They lost connection with their heart, and they lost all their emotional intelligence. But of course, they went on to have children anyway. And so what I'm saying here is really words. But when you heal energetically and you can really feel this in your heart, I'm telling you, like, the word forgiveness isn't even a word anymore. You're just like, cool, got it, understand. And there's no blame left or anything like that. And I think the audience here have heard now from both of us how the father wound can form, either through a father being mistreating you that you feel, or a father not being there at all. Now, one of the ultimate signs of healing is that you become your own father or your own mother. What does this mean? Biologically, of course, you've got a father, but you see, the source of our suffering is actually expectation. We want to rewrite the past.
Yeah.
When you want to rewrite the past, when you wish that your father was a different way, you create your own suffering. But when you can say, he is his human, it's okay whenever they are. I'm now in charge of my emotions. I'm in charge of my thoughts. I'm the captain of my destiny.
Yeah.
That's when the deepest healing is set in. And it's a beautiful place, because at that point, your dad or your parents, they just can't trick you anymore. They cannot. And it took me a long time to get there, but I'm telling you, it's fucking incredible.
This is a really really key point, because when I was in that moment of deciding whether I should reach out to my father and whether I shouldn't, one thing that was going through my mind is what's the outcome going to be like? You know, there was going to be a few things, right? Either he was going to react positively, and then where would that positivity lead to? So where would this relationship lead to? Either it would lead to that him wanting to be in the role of a father in my life now that we have reconnected. He wants to give me his time and he wants to hear me out. He wants to actually actively be a father in my life. Or does it mean that he's happy to have me in his life, but he's still not ready to actually be an active father for many reasons? Like, one is that I'm already so much, I've already gone through the stages of life where what is left for him to actually be a father there for? I'm already past my 20s. I've been married. I've got a kid now. What are you going to do for me? So maybe he's like, well, there's no space for me to be a father. So what I can do is have like some sort of relationship. Or is it going to be that he's just going to be happy the fact that, okay, my son is reconnected with me now, and that's about it? And it's like, okay, so what are my expectations then? Do I want a father in my life? Do I want him to realize that over these 20 years he hasn't had a chance to be a father to me? So now I'm giving him this chance, right? Like, it's not really me, but it's like I'm giving him this. I'm giving him the window to me. So are you gonna accept that? Are you actually gonna reach out through that window, and are you gonna be an active father or not? So all these things were going through my mind, and the thing that helped me settle was to realize that I'm not doing this for him, right? Me reaching out to him and me wanting to close that father wound, it's actually not for his sake. Because if it was for his sake, if he wanted to cut it off again, then I would be back to square zero, right? So it's not really for him. And is it really for myself? Because if it's for myself, I have all these expectations to put on top of him, and I don't even know him yet, right? I'm gonna put all these expectations on him for him to be, kind to me, for him to be a father to me. Now I don't know who he is. I haven't been with him for 20 years, so how can I have that expectation? So for me, the most powerful thing is that it's beyond me, and it's beyond my father. It's actually for my connection with God. And I don't know if that works with many people who are watching here. Maybe it does for some of you. It doesn't for maybe for others that's interpreted in a different way. But for me, it was like, my connection with God is the most sacred thing in this relationship here. And if I can if through this relationship between me and my father, I can make that vertical relationship better through this horizontal relationship, then I'm going to keep going no matter if my father reciprocates in the right way or not. And whether my expectations of him are going to be met or not. Whether that happens or not, I'm going to try and keep up this horizontal relationship because I know it's going to have this vertical presence as well.
I love that. That's really powerful. Yeah, it's definitely, I feel something very similar actually in, when it comes to inner child healing. You see, with the father wound, you feel your father was absent or didn't treat you right or whatever, wasn't emotionally available. There's a little child in you, an 8-year-old you, 10-year-old you, whatever, who just feels like they were abandoned. Something is missing. And connecting with the universe or with God is the most powerful way to feel that wholeness. And whether you believe in just Darwin evolution or God through religion, you're gonna feel it, man, when you go deep enough. I'll tell you why. According to, if you look at religions like Christianity or Islam, okay, there's one God that created us all in the universe. We're all children of him. Cool, you can use that then. And if you just look at science, modern science, nothing to do with religion, is now telling us that all of us, the atoms in our body, have come directly from the stars. The carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in your body were forged in stars billions of years ago. And that goes with religion too. So when you connect with the fact that there is a creator that goes back billions of years, that engineered us, that is the life source that lives inside of us. And I have a way of connecting with that really powerfully. It's how I help my clients and myself. And I'm telling you, man, when you feel that, It is the most powerful thing. You will feel whole, you'll feel complete, you'll feel powerful. And you see, all that power that you once gave to your father or any other parent, you now reclaim it. And it actually elevates, because as you said, vertically, if you connect with God or the universe, if I say to myself, I'm made from stardust, I have the power to feel any emotion I want. And no other human can touch that. Not my father, not nobody. Then you're going to feel incredible. And that to me is the essence of inner child healing. Another thing here, Shoaib, is that what I've called the father wound, what I've labeled as, is it's not personal with the father. There is no blame here whatsoever. Yeah. Our ancestry, which involves millions of years of evolution on this planet, the men have mostly done the heavy work, the fighting, the warfare, the hunting, the fighting the animals. So being in survival mode, not being emotionally intelligent, but just being hardened, ready to go, ready to kill, ready to fight, that was beneficial for the men. All of our forefathers, that was a beneficial trait. And now, all of a sudden, they're getting stick for it in the modern era, where we don't need to be at war. We don't need to fight lions. We have jobs, safe houses, safe laws. And it's like, oh, now we need to be emotionally soft and caring. And men are having a difficult time. And I feel that. I understand it in my heart. So this is a big thing, and it goes back to our heritage as humans. Yeah. How does that land for you when you hear that?
Yeah. This is really important, because I recently did a post on my Instagram which basically touches on this, where I titled it as "Fatherhood is not about changing nappies," and I thought that might trigger some people, right? Because I'm not saying that fathers should not be involved. In fact, I'm probably one of the people in the whole kind of fatherhood Instagram space that really encourages fathers to be involved from the get-go with your children, like even from the point that the baby's in the womb, to really be involved in the whole process of the pregnancy and immediately after the pregnancy. But very early on, because I had promised myself that, well, my father wasn't around, so I'm going to make sure that I'm going to be really, really involved in my child's life, that I tried to be involved in every single point of the process, such that it became so crippling. Why? Because like you said, it's not in my nature to 100% be on that level of softness and that level of emotional connection and that nurturing. Whereas for a mother, that's we would find that's there. And so it became crippling to such an extent that I felt guilty doing the things that I should be doing as a father, which is maybe going out to work, maybe doing this and maybe doing that. And so I began to realize that actually success in my fatherhood isn't just about me doing the things which are directly involved with my children. Success in my fatherhood is also them seeing me go out and do things that look that so they can recognize that this is what a man or a father does when he goes out and he provides, he goes out and he protects, he goes out and he does all of these other things as well. And that is very much part of his fatherhood. And not it means that if he's not there for some time period, that's actually okay. And it was important for me to realize that, because I felt like I was failing if I wasn't involved in all of these processes. So I think that point is really, really important to know that there is sort of there are some emotions and some of our psychology has a natural presence in what has sort of naturally formed in human beings from our inner selves, and from what's been passed down to us through generations. And now, like you said, that's being changed to such an extent that fathers, because they're sort of maybe being forced to take this role of being more involved than they may be used to. Okay, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing that they are being more involved in their child's life. But because that's not happened before, there isn't this generational knowledge for a man to model himself off.
Yep.
Whereas for a woman, there is just generational knowledge of what it is to be a mother and how to perform in motherhood. Whereas for fathers, it's not really there. And so the fathers are beginning to suffer. and not being able to, not having access to that generation knowledge, and whilst men being men, not talking to each other, not letting their emotions out, it's having a detrimental effect on how men are actually fathering. And so definitely this discussion needs to be open to realize that there are some natural characteristics that are starting to be maybe looked down upon or being changed. And we need to allow fathers and men to have that space to rediscover that so that they can implement it in the right way when it comes to them being fathers and them being maybe good men in society, being good husbands or whatever that is.
Yeah, great points. Love them. You said some interesting things there. I think the first thing there actually is that I don't know if you realized, but the guilt you felt of, I can't go out and work as much because I need to be around more for my son because my father wasn't around for me so much. There's very normal first stage of reacting to your trauma. Yes. And thank God you awaken from that, because people go their whole lives as a reaction, just reacting to something that happened in their childhood. And the intention is clean. So if your father was like, did X, so you want to do Y to make sure you never become like that. The thing is, you're reacting to pain. And anytime you're reacting to pain, you carry pain. That's just the thing. So the most healed state for anyone listening is, if I were to ask you this question, how would you behave right now if for a moment none of your past happened? Like, it's just gone. But you can't ask your logical mind this because it's going to try to think. If your whole past was just erased right now and you were just happy, free, blank slate, how would you feel different? And you don't actually have to answer that now, but it's just a question for people to think about, because then it's like, oh, I'm not carrying grief. Nothing's wrong with me. Nothing wrong happened to my mom. And this is the cleansing process of your heart. This is how you cleanse your body, by removing the unhappy story, because the unhappy story is what keeps the pain alive in your body. And this is one of the most fundamental healing processes. And once you've done that, you'll then be able to connect with your intuition and with your biology, like you've said. So it's like what a man's biology, conventionally, masculine energy, wants to compete, provide, protect, conquer, challenge themselves, do things that make us feel challenged but grow as well. Whereas feminine energy conventionally is more concerned with nurturing and connecting with people. That's why women make mothers better. That's why women can make children feel incredibly loved and safe and warm. Women are the messengers of love much more. But if you abandon your natural biology, it's going to hurt in different ways. But coming back to the fathers then, it's not that they want to, as I said before, it's not that they want to do what they're doing. They didn't choose to be that way when they were 5. It just plays out as a result of the trauma they're carrying.
Yeah, exactly. And this is an important point that you mentioned about natural biology. Like in Islam, this is what we call a fitra. So a fitra is like basically your natural disposition that you've been created with, that because we have the belief that God is a creator and he's created everything and everyone, that he's instilled this sort of natural thing that all human beings will come back to, and that natural thing, it kind of puts itself across all stages. So the natural formation of your mind, where your mind settles, the natural way that your heart settles, the natural way in which you perceive right and wrong, the natural abilities to basically have social connections and things like this. So all the kind of natural ways that we are, and what we say is that over time this natural state becomes clouded. So either it's become clouded from a philosophical angle, a theological angle, where you no longer recognize God, right? So it's become clouded in that way, and that needs to be assessed through maybe more spiritual means. But there could also be a clouding of you. What you're just mentioning is you've told yourself a story over so many years that this is who you are, and these are the circumstances that has created you and created the circumstances of your life, and you're retelling yourself that story every time you go into a new situation. You're always telling yourself that story. And
Exactly.
that's you clouding up that natural instinct inside yourself to really just be you, and to be able to step out of this story that you've told yourself and just connect with that natural thing inside of you, that natural presence that you're supposed to be having, between that vertical presence, like I mentioned before, between you and God. Once you're able to step out of that zone of you telling yourself this story, that's just being, it's just this baggage, this baggage is clouding you, it's clouding you, it's clouding you. And as soon as you break out of that, then you're able to actually see that actually, uh, like you said at the beginning, I'm actually in control of myself. Like I'm not in control of others and how they react and what their decisions are in their life, but I can make decisions for myself. And once you're able to really feel that, you're able to feel that, that's true freedom, right? That's real freedom. Like people say that it's freedom to have millions and millions of pounds. But if that freedom of having that £1 million is also not attached to the freedom of being able to spend things without being told what you should spend on. If you're being told that you need to buy the next Rolex and you need to buy the next Ferrari and you need to spend your money on looking this way and that way, then that £1 million isn't true freedom, is it? Because you're still being tied down by something else. So you need to get to a stage where there is that true freedom where you can really be able to talk to yourself, talk to God, talk to what is beyond yourself, and experience that level of true freedom to get out of this stage of you telling yourself that you only live through this traumatic experience and that's it, that's who you are.
Yeah, great point. Like, this is the next thing I wanted to talk about, actually, that even if you tell yourself, okay, like, you see, if you theoretically tell yourself, fine, it's not my father's fault, my past is clean, I don't carry no grief, everything's okay, I don't need to fix myself. The way we work is that we have deep programs in our subconscious. So if you, as a child, were programmed to live in survival mode because your father was explosively angry, or you feel like you need to prove yourself because he was absent and you need to fill in his shoes and, become a man at a young age, because you're in those reactionary patterns of living with your guard up, like you need to prove yourself. You don't know that you're doing that because it's all you've ever done since a young age. You don't know that you're triggered so easily. You don't realize that you are being offended easily. You don't realize that you have a low self-worth. And I work with people who are like high-flying lawyers or just housewives or millionaires, and they'll be in this rut every day, day in and day out, not realizing that they're on autopilot, chasing more money, chasing the next accolade or whatever, because they think that's the only way for them to feel love, because they didn't receive that love from their father or another parent as a child. And when I tell them this, hey, you're in survival mode because you've been that way since you were a child, it creates an incredible wake-up moment for them, because they're like, I mean, it's painful. It's like, have I been in reaction this whole time? And you'll always know, because when you're in reaction, there's a stress there. There's an unease. So you can go to therapy and say that you've forgiven your past and whatever, but energetically, the emotions in your body, if you're feeling unsafe, if you're in survival mode, it's always going to show, because you take your work too seriously. Maybe you have money issues because you have a scarcity mindset around money, because money was hard to come by in your household.
Yeah.
So you've inherited that programming too. And so you grow up, and it's like every human listening to this has every right to have great health, great wealth. Money is not hard to come by. It can be generated easily, and great relationships. There's tools for that out there. But if you have a program that says, no, life has to be hard, because guess what? When you were a kid, it was hard. Like, you couldn't just relax in your living room. You might get told off, and if you're also scolded for making mistakes, you drop a glass of water and you get told off, it gets rubbed in your face for the next 3 days, you get told you're clumsy. Or one of the favorites for brown people, whether you're black or Asian, is that you're too dark, I wish you were lighter. Things like this, these things, they stay with you.
Yeah.
And then you don't realize. So every person can just do this simple exercise. What are my triggers?
Yeah.
What are the things that actually trigger me in the present moment? And I do this all the time because it's the only way. And your triggers will always reveal to you what are the things that you have stored pain about. So if I take the example of the person who wants to prove themselves through their career, I was talking to a lady just the other day, super successful over in America she is, and she literally quit a high-flying job just because she was no longer the star there and thrived on the validation. And she quit a great job to get a new one so she could be the new star there again and start that validation roller coaster all over again. And that's just one tiny example of how it can manifest, because around, I think it was her father she mentioned, around father, she was never good enough for him. She was never enough. It was always like, but you didn't do this right. You didn't do this right. You didn't do this right. And that is a deeply painful wound to have. And again, it makes you reactionary as an adult. You're like, okay, because I'm not good enough, I have to have people tell me every day, you're amazing, you're a superstar. That's one example of father wound manifesting.
Yeah, these manifestations are really, really important to recognize, and I think more work should be done. I think people like yourself are starting to do it, which is allowing people to recognize what the manifestations are in their own life. Because like you said, a lot of people are living in survival mode, in the reaction mode, and they don't even know it because they don't recognize the symptoms in which they're living it. And that's something I had to quickly realize as well, where, for example, this particular project of dadhood started off as a reaction. Well, why? Because I wanted to make a platform where I could speak about being a father, because I didn't have my father around, and I wanted other people to know that, you know, being a father is important and you must be involved in your children's life. All of that was a reaction to not having my dad around. For years and years and years, I told myself that when I become a father, I'm going to be the best father. When I become a father, I'm going to be a great father. But that there's two sides, because it's not a bad thing that I started that podcast or this podcast. It's not a bad thing that I'm speaking about fatherhood. It's not a bad thing that I'm saying that people should be involved. But where's the intention? Where is it coming from, right? Is it coming from a reaction, or is it coming from a genuinely sincere place? And that's a switch that a lot of people need to make when they're living in this survival mode. They may be that them being put in survival mode may have given them good traits, may have given them good habits, may have given them a good psychology and a good outlook. But where is that being triggered from? Is that constantly coming from a place of negativity, a place of reacting to some trauma? Or are they able to take control of that now and able to use those good things in the most best way possible, and use it as a way to steer themselves and steer other people around them towards some sort of goodness? And that's what I had to realize with this project, is that, okay, it started off like that, but I can now take control of it and I can steer it in the right direction. And I think a lot of people who have that father wound need to go through that process of healing, so they can start steering the things that are in their life. It doesn't mean you have to give up what your life is now. Like, some people might be listening to you and saying that I've been living in my whole life as survival mode. Does that mean I need to give up my life and change my life? No, it doesn't. It just means that you need to steer it in the right direction. You need to be the captain of that ship rather than just letting it sail.
Yeah, amazing points. Thank you for those. Yeah, powerful points, because it's the same with everyone. All of our ancestors, we are a flipping reaction. We are a survival reaction, man. That's what we are. We respond to this. We're a reaction to the sun. The sun grows things on the planet. Everything in life is an exchange with each other. So there's nothing wrong with having been in survival mode. Survival mode is actually sacred, because were it not for survival mode, we wouldn't be here right now. So it's a sacred thing, and I cherish it, and I'm thankful for it. But as I said, things change. Nothing in this universe ever stays the same. So what was once incredibly useful, which is survival mode, being hyper vigilant, pleasing others, being a people pleaser, was an extremely valued survival tool, because if you please people in your tribe, they won't stab you. They won't have you killed. So that's the thing. So these things that were once useful are only now becoming redundant and making us suffer, because we have more safety around us. So it's a delicate process of having that compassion for yourself and saying, cool, now you have to go inward and say, what's going to give me that fulfillment? What does my heart want? Me, for example, I had crippling anxiety. I just sat and read books. I didn't know. All I wanted to do was heal myself. And then that turned into basically a superpower where I'm able to spend time with clients one to one or in group classes and just heal decades worth of trauma
Mm.
because of the years that I went through. So a really important principle is that all the suffering that you have been through is gold, because in this universe it's only through suffering that peace and joy is able to come. Even if you walk through a forest, a beautiful forest full of the most incredible tall trees that's abundant with life, but if you look on the ground, it's all death. It's literally dead leaves. Soil is nothing but dead animals and plants. Where do the trees grow from? They grow from death.
Yeah.
That's the cycle of life. Something is born, something dies. Something born, something dies. So trauma is like the death of the old ways and the birth of the new. Even planet Earth was born from the death of a star. That's the cycle of the universe. So when you get in sync with the cycles of the universe in that way, you're like, oh, cool, there's nothing wrong with me. And if I'm triggered right now, I can actually use it as a way to awaken.
Yeah.
And that's a very, very beautiful thing.
Yeah, this is really key point for myself, because coming from an Islamic Muslim faith background, um, that's something that's taught constantly and constantly again through the teachings of Islam. Like there's a saying of the Prophet Muhammad where he says that the believer is between two states. He's between patience and he's between gratefulness. Why? Because when uh, something bad happens to him in his life, he's patient with that bad thing. And whenever something good
Mm,
happens to him in his life, he's grateful for that thing. And so he says,
mm,
he ends it by saying, therefore, believers are always in a state of goodness, no matter what happens, right? And so
yeah,
it's
I like
just
that.
instilling that psychology within yourself that
Mm,
whatever happens in your life, whether it's a trauma or whether it's something good, will eventually always lead to a good outcome as long as you can react to it in the right way. And I think that's the key thing of the Prophet teaching us the way in which to react. You must react to this bad thing with patience, and this great thing with gratefulness, right? This great thing that happened to you, don't become arrogant due to it. It wasn't because of you, right? It wasn't. It would. There were 1,000 people around you that facilitated for this good thing. There was God that also facilitated for this good thing and allowed it to happen. So don't become arrogant. Become grateful. And the same thing with the patience, right?
mm,
This bad things happen to you. Don't just react to it and say, "Oh my, my life is going to end here, and this is going to be the worst thing that's ever happened to me." It might feel that bad, but if you have some patience in it and you just try to endure it as much as possible, and you then in the patience, right? The key thing with patience that the scholars of Islam, how they understand patience, is that it's not you just enduring things; it's you seeing the bright side and running towards that bright side, right? So patience is not something that's stagnant. It's an active. It's a verb. It's doing patience. It's you actually finding solutions. You're actually going out there and trying to get out of that hole that
mm,
you're in right now.
mm,
Not just waiting for
mm,
that
mm.
hole to kind of for it to fill up, or for this problem to
Yeah,
disappear. You're actually finding solutions to it. So always
yeah.
being in a state of patience and gratefulness, that will actually
Mm,
allow for your psychology to be maybe at the most optimum and a healthy point in which
mm,
you're able to respond to whatever's going on. And it's so important. So you begin to recognize that actually what happened to me, this father wound that happened to me, if I wasn't reacting to it with patience, and maybe I can start reacting to it with gratefulness. Maybe I can start seeing the good side to it. Maybe I can start seeing the ways in which it has shaped my life that's leading me to a positive direction. Maybe, for example, I was literally just speaking to one of my mentors about this, right? Sorry for taking time on this part, but I was just speaking to one of my mentors about this, and I said to him, I've been doing some therapy, and I realized in one of those sessions that my mother going through that difficulty with my father, maybe for my mother, what it did is that it created some sort of characteristic and personality in her that she never had before, because her father treated her amazingly. So she grew up with this protected sort of lifestyle, and her now getting treated in a bad way, maybe it opened a characteristic and a personality in her that allowed her to be a bit more tough. And that toughness allowed her to then deal with these three children who were really tough to deal with. Right, me, my brother, and my
Yeah.
sister were really
Yeah.
tough people, and we did, all sorts of things. Maybe she had to go through that in order to build that characteristic, in order to respond to her children in the best way possible. So I'm not saying that was the reason for it. I'm not saying that gives an excuse for abusive relationships. Definitely not. I'm just saying that maybe there's a way to think about certain things that have happened in your life in a way in which you can bring goodness and you can then start moving forward.
I love that. Yeah, so many good points there. But on the last
Yeah.
one that you just spoke about, there is a beauty in everything, and the thing is, you cannot see it in the moment that you're hurting. You have to go through certain cycles of being wounded, feeling broken, feeling devastated, to then climbing out of that with your resilience and your faith and feeling, wow, this is why it happened. So from a father wound, so that we can be better men, so that we can connect with our kids or the people around us or our wife or whoever in a more emotionally intelligent and loving way,
Yeah.
so that they don't feel abandoned, they don't feel angry. So that's the simple lesson there. But there is a lesson in everything, like you said about this girl here who needed to learn that resilience coming from a sheltered background. I do believe that there aren't coincidences. I used to find that difficult to comprehend before, but I just feel like I know it now, because everything that happens around us, there's so many factors, as you said before, thousands of things, actually trillions of things had to happen for us to even be born. Trillions.
Yeah.
Like how many people, everything that happened for us to even be here, trillions of things happened, for us to be having this podcast, trillions of things. I don't even know how this works. I'm looking at a piece of glass and I can see your face somewhere else. Yeah. And there's people listening to us from all over the world. Like, wow. So, and this will lead to something else. There'll be people in the crowd having an awakening. So that everything has a chain effect on each other. And just because you can't see what beauty is involved now doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah.
And I like what you mentioned about arrogance before as well, because you see, and here's what's really deep. This always hits my clients. When we feel sorry for ourselves, it's one of the highest forms of arrogance and ego. Because what we're saying is, all the gratitude that you could be having to have this breath, these two eyes that could see this body, just to be alive, it's like that. My iPhone broke and I have money problems. Damn it. This little, or something like that. Or when you move into feeling sorry for yourself, or even if it's your father or whatever, you're losing perspective of the bigger picture so badly, and you're cocooning into your own little story incredibly well. All of your life energy that you have, you're cocooning into this feeling of like doom and anxiety, and forgetting about the bigger picture and the power you do have. And you're believing that you're putting so much energy and force into blaming your dad or blaming society or blaming your past, whatever, that what else is arrogance is that kind of force, that charge. So humility, I've found, is it's just the most empowering thing. I think God speaks to us, intuition speaks to us, the universe guides us when we move into humility.
Yeah.
When we're like, hey, I have this intention that I want to do this, but I know that I don't control everything. I'm one tiny piece of this life. And just give me that guidance, please. And it comes. That's what's happened for me, and you might feel the same way. I really believe in that.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. If you finally tell yourself that there are factors beyond myself that influence the way that I lead my life, and you recognize that there is guidance out there, like a divine type of guidance that is out there, that can steer your life in a certain direction, then you begin to feel less of an anxiety, because that the anxiety that's there, it's either you're thinking into the past worried about what you did, or you're thinking into the future worried about what you are trying to do, and all of that thinking in the past and the future paralyzes you from making any steps in the moment. But once you recognize, okay, there is something higher above me that has this greater knowledge and has this divine guidance, and in his hands could be the goodness in my life and the direction that I want it to go, then you start to take away this anxiety, because that anxiety is only because you're thinking, what can I do? And what did I do? Right? But if you begin to realize that actually sometimes it's not just you, right? There are things that can happen without you making them happen. For example, did you choose who your mother was? Did you choose who your brother was? Did you choose your race? Did you choose your nationality? Did you choose for you to be born in this time period, in this era? There are so many things that are completely outside of our control that we can't be anxious about everything that's going to happen in the future and everything that happened in the past. And when we let that go and realize that actually there's something above me that can actually guide this into a much better direction, there's like a there's a sense of this relief, this sense of this breath
Yeah,
coming out,
massively.
and you can sort of just say, well, let me go according to this plan. And that doesn't mean like a common thing in the Islamic tradition is this phrase which is called tie your camel, right? Which basically means that, in the desert, right, they would have camels, and somebody would say, well, if God is supposed to take care of everything, then I'll leave my camel here without tying its rope to the post, and when I go into the shop and I come back, the camel will still be there. You can't just put your hands up and say that you don't tie your camel. No, you must tie your camel. You must take some steps towards making that life that you want to make. But there's a sense of relief that it's not all down to you. You can't control every single little factor, because you didn't control the factors in the past about the circumstance in which you were born in, nor did you
Exactly.
control many of the things that led you to your life here. So you're not going to control everything that happens later, but there's some things that you must control and leave the rest up to God, or whatever it is, that higher being.
I'm just laughing about the action taking, because if you read too much into like law of attraction and mindfulness, you can start to think that you can just sit there and think positive and things will happen, but it doesn't
Exactly.
work like that at all. Yeah. I read this a great analogy for it online. If you take a farmer who wants to grow a beautiful crop, they go in the soil and they plant a seed in the soil, right? But when they plant it and when they've prepared the ground, the farmer doesn't control the sunlight that comes. How cloudy is it today? How sunny will it be? We don't know. The more sun, the more growth. Farmer doesn't control how many animals and insects are going to come and try to dig up those seeds and eat the crops or whatever. The farmer doesn't control the richness of that soil from the millions of years that happened before that. The farmer doesn't control the rainfall, the wind, the ice. In other words, there are a million more factors that you cannot control in your life. And the anxiety, the sense of doom, the self-pity, the lack of self-belief, all these negative, heavy emotions come when you start to think that you're the only one driving this ship. You're like, all this pressure, all the responsibility on me? Shit. And again, you start, that's where that sneaky form of arrogance comes in.
Yeah.
Because you're making it all about me.
Yeah.
And so what are the practical steps that we can actually take to move into faith, move into humility? By faith, I don't just mean religion. I mean, because I don't follow any religion. I mean, believing in a bigger plan and relaxing internally. Well, for me, one thing I want to share is that I've been following a certain routine for 2.5 years since lockdown came, and it changed my life. So this is incredible. In the morning, before I think about like business or clients or coaching or bills or getting back to my mom or anything like that involves tension, I think about my well-being. Number one priority. So I meditate to clear my mind. I groom to make sure I look and feel good.
Yeah.
Right? We all feel good if we feel good. Have a cold shower. That's huge. Like a nice, just a 30-second spray of cold water at the end of your shower is going to make you feel so alive. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And then I'll go outside, get some sunlight, breathe in that fresh air, maybe a little exercise. You do these few simple things, and now you're connected with life. You're not stuck in your little head about little me. And when you're connected to life in that way, it's very healing. It's very profound. It empowers you for the day, and you're in a better place to take on things, whether it's healing from a father wound or finding a new job, whatever it is.
That's amazing, man. That's amazing. I'm definitely gonna, note some of those things down when I listen back to this and start editing it.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially that cold shower, man. That must.
Trust me, it's incredible. You got to
It
try
seems
it.
scary, but I have done it a couple of times here and there.
It
But I've
is
not made
scary.
it. I've not made it daily routine. I'm guessing it gets easier, yeah, as you do it every day.
It gets easier, but it's never easy. Like, I've been doing it 2.5 years. It's winter right now, and
Yeah.
it's brutal still. I'm like, but here's the thing: you got to learn to surrender and relax to the brutality of it. And if you can relax in the cold, man, everything else feels easy. Believe me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
This.
it does stabilize your nervous system, as someone's correctly said in
Mm.
the comments there.
Somebody said an ice bath as well. Yeah, that'll take a while though, wouldn't it? Yeah, no, I think morning routines are powerful, aren't they? I mean, in again going
Extremely.
back to kind of my own background, what we're advised from our faith is to make the most of the mornings because the morning has a blessing in it. Is a saying, the morning has a blessing, and that blessing can sort of manifest in many different ways. And you find that even now through many sort of scientific studies that if you get things done in the morning, you work out in the morning, or you wake up a bit earlier, you have you write sort of maybe into a gratitude journal or something in the morning, it starts off your day in the best way possible. And so maybe that is the sort of blessing the morning that's been spoken about. And so we obviously try to make sure that we pray in that morning, and that we make sort of personal supplications to God as well in terms of what we want this day to look like. So, for example, there is a supplication that says, God, I want you to give me good health and good wealth and and all these types of things. So it's sort of just setting you up for the day where you're sort of spiritually ready and you kind of know that your day should be going in the best direction as possible. And I think it's definitely a good step for somebody who wants to, part of that fatherhood that we're saying is stepping outside of the anxiety, recognizing that you don't have to always tell yourself this story from the past, and that neither do you always have to have the pressure to control every single variable that happens during that day. And so a way to start kind of healing that fatherhood, I think the morning routines and stuff like that are very, very powerful. But that can't be the end of it, right? There needs to be a lot more that needs to be done in terms of like some of the services you offer, which is akin to therapy, and maybe even going through formalized professional therapy if that's something that you need as well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. Yeah, when you do things like basically bring your body into a better energetic state. So you've done your cold shower, you've got your sunlight, you've done some deep breathing. You feel relaxed, you feel soft, you feel safe. Problem with that is, as soon as someone cuts you off in traffic or someone
That's it.
says you did rubbish at work, oh, you mother, so if your trigger comes up, your trigger reveals something deeper.
Yes.
For example, at work, someone says, oh, you didn't do this correctly, I've told you to before. Instead of just taking that as normal feedback, which perhaps is a little critical, and maybe they're right, maybe you did make a mistake, nothing wrong with that, it makes you feel like you're gonna die. It feels like doom. So you're not responding to it as a regular daily thing. You're actually responding to it as the afraid and confused child that you once were,
Yeah.
who is terrified of your father's judgment. And that's where inner child healing comes in. Most adults, including myself, everyone, yourself, but just to different degrees, we react to present moment things as the scared and afraid child that we were at 8 years of age.
Very true.
I deal with overweight people. The most typical common thing worldwide is, they're doing good, they lost a few pounds, then they have a slice of pizza and they're like, oh, I'm such a bad person, I'm overweight, I'm horrible, I'm shameful. They're not just reacting to enjoying some pizza.
Yeah.
They're reacting to all the fat shaming they received when they were 10. Now they feel like it's really true. I'm a bad fat person.
Yeah.
And so the emotional signature of your past lives inside of you. And Indians call that karma. That is our responsibility in this life to work that out, the negative energetic signatures of our past, to just gently work that out. And as you do this, another thing is, there's a lot of talk about healing nowadays. Another thing is that there's nothing wrong with you, man. You got traumas, you got triggers, there's nothing
I
wrong
love
with
that.
you. This is, you don't need to fix yourself, man. I fell into that trap for a little bit. Don't put pressure on yourself. You are exactly as God intended. Remember, there's a bigger plan. Relax. Relax, completely relax. Slow down. Even when you know there's things to work on, money issues, fitness issues, inner child healing, chill out about it. Allow yourself to do everything in the day. Allow yourself to go outside, have a walk. Allow yourself to watch a movie. Allow yourself to work out. Don't just think, oh, now I need to rush and get this one thing done. Because rushing to get this one thing changed is in itself a trauma response. The desperation to get something done before I can be happy is also a trauma response from childhood. That said, you know, when your parents catastrophize something, you didn't take the chicken out, you didn't hoover, you didn't do, you know, and they come down on you like a ton of bricks. So you start thinking, oh God, you know, I can't relax. Well, it's not true. You're safe to relax right now.
I think that's super important, that we shouldn't put too much pressure on ourselves. And the healing comes at a time when it needs to come, right? Like, recently just speaking to my brother, and he's going through this process of healing, I'd say. And he's much older than me. You know, he's about 6 years older than me. And
Okay.
so you'd imagine that, uh, the eldest would maybe go through healing, and then the next one, and then the youngest one, and it doesn't always work out like that. Everybody sort of has their own timeline of when that healing's gonna occur, because there's different things that happen at different points in people's lives. But I think it's also obviously important to kind of keep at the forefront that the healing is important at the end of the day. I remember speaking to my brother at one point and saying that, him saying, I'm happy that I don't have to have a relationship with my dad, and I'm it gives me so much peace, and it gives me so much freedom. And I said to him, well, you might feel like that right now, but you're gonna feel like that when you have a child. And he couldn't say anything. Why? Because then you're like, I realized when my child came, the problems of my inner child came out, and that's gonna happen, right? And so why not
Yeah.
address it before it gets to that point? So I'm not saying put pressure on yourself to do it because it's a trend to do this healing. I said take it at a time where it feels best for you, but also don't leave it until you have to respond to it because of some sort of shock and calamity that's come into your life. Like, allow yourself to catch yourself before that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Lovely points. Yeah, I think it's a very nice way to start wrapping this conversation
Yeah.
up quite beautifully as well, because it's just confirming that, there's a sweet spot that all of us humans need to attain, which is a daily practice, which is, right, what are the priorities in my life? Okay, perhaps healing from a father wound or some kind of trauma is one of them. How can I balance that into my life? Like, I'm not going to ignore it as though it's not important, because that's denial. But I'm not going to chase it either, because that's desperation, and it's just another form of trauma to try to get something done as though it's life or death, and it's not life or death.
Yeah.
So finding that middle ground for yourself, wherever you are, whatever age you're at, whatever stage you're at, it can be done.
Yeah, definitely.
Even if you're actually living at home with your father who you're unhappy with. That's where I did the bulk of my healing. When I was living at home with a father who was unhappy with, I just created my little safe sanctuary in my bedroom and used the tools actually which came through him, such as self-help books, which is another source of gratitude, that whilst we can look back and say, man, this happened because of so and so, well, so did the good things. He wouldn't be here if it weren't for him. I wouldn't be who I am were it not for my father, right? So it's always important to shift to gratitude more in everything you do. So yeah, I feel like such a nice way to summarize this is to relax, not take it too seriously, remember there's a silver lining,
Yeah.
a large silver lining in this, and to count your blessings more than you count your problems.
100%.
That's a huge part of my daily life, and if people stick to this, in itself, you may intuitively carve your own path to inner child healing, as I did. But I'll also mention, as you said, there are much more powerful ways. Most people come to me from therapists, I'll be honest,
Okay.
from professional psychologists, from counselors, because these conventional methods are really slow, unfortunately, because they use intellect
Yeah.
to solve deep energetic problems. What I do is, instead of talking, I go into the body, directly into the nervous system, and I see people healing decades worth of trauma in a single session. Even it's possible. It's incredible. Yeah, like, and it's not pretty. People should know that inner child healing is not pretty. I spent like 2 days of flooded in tears when I got to my inner child and I healed it. It was tears and tears and tears, perhaps more than 2 days. It is not a pretty process because you're going to have to face all the dormant shit that you've hidden, the dormant pain, the pretending like you're okay with what your dad did, pretending like you're not in pain, pretending like you're happy just because now you've made $1 million and got the dream house. So bull. Underneath that, when sometimes you don't know, actually, because humans are masterful at hiding things and being in denial. But yeah, everyone should know that inner child healing is you're gonna cry a lot. My whole body was shaking in grief and pain. The whole body from shakes. I have clients who, like one of their arms, for example, or a part of their body, they'll get throbbing headaches. The arm will become physically tense. The legs will feel jammed. Why? Because trauma lives in the body.
Yeah.
Which is why therapy is slow, very slow. Therapy is talking up here. Trauma, which is emotion. Emotion is energy. Energy in motion. Physical energy lives and runs through your body. If you heal that body, it's going to shake, it's going to tremble, and then it's going to be reborn. That is how deep healing works.
I think a really powerful book on that I read was The Body Keeps the Score. I'm not sure if you read it.
Yes, exactly.
That kind of goes quite deep into that aspect. Somebody's just mentioned it now. The Body Keeps the Score. Yeah, it's very powerful. It's very important, and it gives
Bessel van der Kolk, right?
Yes, it gives you a different outlook into traumas and therapy and all the things that we've been discussing. And I think it has a sort of a mindset shift in terms of how you approach some of these things. And I think one of the things I'd like to leave people with, if you don't mind, just adding something on, is like we've been saying, having that God level accountability, I think is so important. Knowing that there is, number one, there's God there that can direct your life in the most sort of divine way, so you don't have to take control of everything. But also at the same time that if you've been created for some sort of purpose, and you need to sort of find what that is and attune yourself with it, so that you're not just living your life for yourself. You're living your life beyond yourself, attuned to this kind of God-given purpose, and it's moving you in a positive direction. Because once you do start some of this healing, it can very easily, and it did for me, you can start falling into arrogance. You can start saying that, well, I'm the one that's taking this path towards healing, and I'm the one that's reaching out to my dad, and I'm the one that's feeling all of these emotions, and I'm the one that's going through this and that, and if I get over this, it's because of me, right? And if I manage to solve this, it's because of me. And the only way to really get that out of your system is to realize that it's not you in reality. It's this God-given purpose that you're directing yourself towards. And obviously for us, what that translates to as Muslims is that God wants us to reach paradise, and so he's given us this methodology to sort of reach paradise. And so it's kind of like me healing myself, it's because of that. Me talking to my dad is because of that. something happens in my life, it's because of that. Something happened in the past is because of that. And so it goes beyond just myself, and it goes beyond just anyone else, and it keeps going in a positive direction. But I think even if you're not thinking about it the way I'm thinking about it, if you're not Muslim, you've got another outlook, you can take that as a lesson, that knowing that there's this God level of accountability, that you don't have to control anything, and everything can go in a direction that's beyond just yourself. And hopefully that should start to maybe allow you to either start or maybe even speed up that journey towards healing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I was aware that. Show you
Yeah.
for the listeners, Shoaib runs a podcast, like we said in the start, Dadhood, and you are a Muslim, so it's fine for you to talk about
Yeah.
how rooted you are in God. Someone from the audience, and I'm sure other people may be feeling this, people are potentially triggered by that word. And just because someone talks about God doesn't mean that they're pushing that on you. The essence of that is, I mean, if you're sat there right now, your heart is beating. It's got nothing to do with you. You don't control that, but it's keeping you alive.
Yeah.
Even if you forget about it, it keeps beating for you. How? Why? We don't know. Science doesn't even know. And that mystery element to the universe is what people basically call universe, if they don't like using the word God, is what we were referencing earlier. So that's a nice way to look at it as well. If the word God feels loaded to you, then I invite people to just consider that things run our body. The cells in your hair and your nails are growing as we speak, and we don't know why that's happening. So we can all choose whatever word we want, but it's a fact that things happen that are not in our control. And if we surrender to that and trust it, if we trust the parts that are not in our control, then we're going to be able to relax. And yeah, perhaps that's what you're really pointing to.
Yeah.
So I love that message. And yeah, so it's been a great conversation.
It's been amazing.
About an hour and 20 in. I hope the crowd here feels like we've given you a lot of good value, a lot of actionable steps about taking simple actions and doing deep inner child healing, and that the end result is love. And you can measure it by how often are you triggered, how easeful are you, how grateful are you to be alive, how non-reactionary are you, how compassionate are you towards yourself. These things are good measures towards how healed you are. And it's not always going to be perfect. You're still human. You'll still always be triggered in whatever you do. So these are the messages that I want to leave. And once again, thanks for reaching out to me to collaborate for this. It's been fun. Thanks for having me on your podcast. And I look forward to perhaps doing this again sometime.
Definitely. This has been a really fruitful discussion. I think it's been a part of healing for myself. It's just having this discussion. And I think, in 2023 we are now, a lot of this doesn't happen anymore. Sitting together with somebody for an hour and just to have a chat about some of these things. So I think that
it's true.
If this didn't benefit you guys who are watching it, benefited me, and that's all that matters.
People are definitely saying it benefited, and me too. It was nice to hear your perspectives. Thanks for being vulnerable and sharing your story, Shoaib. And I'm sure we'll talk offline now. So goodbye to you, and goodbye to everyone. Thank you everyone for joining us here today.
Thanks, guys.